Was that tough? Let me know if that was tough. Hello everybody and welcome back to another CS Lightwork video. Now don't worry, that's going to be one of the only hints of unseriousness throughout the video, hopefully. But as you guys probably noticed, I don't usually have my camera on in these videos, but I hope that conveys the importance and severity of what I'm about to sort of share with you guys throughout this video. If you are going to take anything at all away from me, be it this video, be it my channel, or me at all, be it the first or last interaction you have with me, please let it be this message. It is quintessential that you make sure you do absolutely everything in your power possible to achieve your goal before you even consider failure. Now that's the whole premise of this video, because we're going to be touching on essentially every possible thing that you can do to optimize and maximize your chances at securing an internship, right? This is not one of those videos where I'm saying, oh, here's the top 5 things you need to do. Here are the most important things you need to do. No, this video is going to cover every single aspect I could even think to speak about that could enhance your chances at getting an internship, whether it's something that's really important and we all know about, or something that enhances your chances by 0.001%. Because let's be honest, the market is tough, and the only way to beat it is we got to be tougher. And a wise friend of mine once told me that everything you do is a puzzle piece and no effort is lost. Now, that's a really important mindset to actually have going into this process, I think, just because you don't know what small factor, what little thing you did that might be the leading factor and contributor to your success, right? It could be that one project that the recruiter really liked, that one thing you said in the interview that the interviewer really liked, right? That one little additional thing you did on your portfolio that caught someone's eye. So many of these things that you might pass off as little or small or insignificant could be a leading factor in your success. And that's why we need to make sure we optimize and maximize every opportunity we can, right? I was at a previous internship, and something they did is they had the logs of how each interview went in a Slack channel, just brief notes. And I'm not going to tell you guys how I did on the technical basis of that because that one broke my heart. But one of the notes they had under my name was Taseen had a really nice portfolio built. Now, if you asked me about 1 second and the rest of my life before that moment, hey Taseen, do you think, in your opinion, not that my opinion holds any weight, but does it matter if you build a portfolio? I would say absolutely not. I did that at the beginning of university just because I saw some cool ones and I had the time. I had no idea that that could play a factor in, right? And I'm not saying that portfolios are going to make it or break it for you, but what I am trying to say is that it's those things that you might not find significant or might not waste your time on that could be a leading factor, right? Everything is a puzzle piece and you don't know which one is gonna hit, but you need to throw as many darts as you can and make sure each dart you throw is as precise as you can, right? All right, we might be one too many analogies deep, but before getting into the video, again, this whole thing is about doing everything you can so that you can rest assured that even if you don't find success at the time being, that you've done everything you can, right? And I don't want to ever, please don't take this video as a place of, oh, I know what I'm talking about, or I'm up here, I've done this, I've done that. I'm a nobody, I'm a layman, but that's one of the things. A lot of the things I talk about in this video are things that I wish I had done, or things that I still continue to neglect to do, or things that I found success in, right? It's about doing everything you can. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, it's split up into 4 sort of categories, so if you feel like you're comfortable with one, you could skip ahead, but I would suggest going through everything just for different perspective. It's building your resume, but also building the things on your resume, so that's projects, how to choose a project to build, good projects, how to do your bullets for your resume, everything like that, and how to optimize that. Then getting into your LinkedIn and your portfolio, your online sort of presence, doing everything with that. The application process, so actually finding the jobs you need to apply to, getting into those custom applications, everything like that, and how to apply properly. And then finally, interview prep. So that's consistent interview prep, but also for specific interviews once you get those interviews. Feel free to skip ahead to the sections you want, but without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so let's get into the first section. We're going to be talking about making your resume. Now, the way I'm going to take this, I'm going to start with your projects, because I know a lot of you guys might not have had the privilege to have experience yet. So your projects are the main meat of your resume. So let's start with that. Whether you have experience or not, how should you list your projects? What should they be? How should you present them? What should you do with them? What should you build? Now, a good baseline for projects that you might have heard before is they should always have a purpose, a utility, and it's essentially a solution to a problem you've identified, right? So that could be a problem you face on the daily. Maybe you have to do something manually, you automate it, right? Maybe you see some issue with your school site. I've seen this a lot, and so you rebuild that. You see some sort of problem around you and you fix that using your discipline, which is coding, right? Which is development. Now, use case for projects is one of the biggest things. So when you want to present these, you want to essentially present the problem, the solution you did, and code the best iteration of that, right? So that's a very broad way to take things, but essentially you want to start at the root, which is find a problem that you can solve. Now, the reason I think it's best to take it this way, especially with the enhancement of AI and coding tools, not that it's less impressive, but technical implementation has become much, 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 much easier, right? If you were to list a web development, like a website you built maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that could be a bit more impressive relative to now, in the sense that now you could tell Lovable, you could tell Chat, you could tell Claude to code up the website that you want, and there's still value in the idea. So that's the key point, right? The problem you're solving, but not as much in technical capability. Now, don't get me wrong, there are so many projects that still show technical capability, right? But at the same time, with that sort of growth of AI and the classic YouTube tutorial following, identifying a unique problem and solving that is the best way you could sort of tackle a project. Now, if you want to go about the technical implementation route and sort of show your skills in that, that's where you should get into sort of making sure that whatever you're working on is very, I would say, domain specific. So when it comes to technical side, you could be looking into, for example, machine learning, and that's when you could look into training your models, building your own LLMs, everything like that. Or you could also look into, if you're looking on like a lower level side, I know a lot of people work with building their own terminals, building OS, rebuilding Git as well. But even projects like that, right? The key thing is you want to still sort of show uniqueness and purpose and utility. I think above all, the best projects are always going to be the ones that are unique and also have that technical sort of advancement side. But ideally, it's that uniqueness that always gets noticed, right? Your recruiters are going to look at a bunch of resumes. If they see repeated projects, they're not going to see any difference, but it's the ones that are unique, the ones they haven't seen before, that they're going to be like, oh, okay, and look into that one, right? And how do you get that? Again, it's your own problem, right? The uniqueness of the solution will be just as unique as the problem, right? So that's sort of how you, I would say, to approach it. Don't hesitate to spend some time on your projects. It is much better to have one or a couple solid projects and get the best iteration of those out, rather than have a bunch of common ones or simpler ones, right? And once you have those solutions, feel free to add in, right? If you want to make it an ML based one, feel free to somehow, maybe you could put a model in there. If you want it to be lower level project, then think of a problem, but then try to approach it from that sort of end. You can make these projects domain specific, and you can always advance them technically, but the root idea is to find a problem and a unique solution for that problem. Now, the only other point I want to make about projects is to make sure you GitHub it. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be linked on the project line, which I'll get into later, but have it on your GitHub so that that plays into your portfolio that we're going to get into, but put that on GitHub. And I know this is going to come off as a bit general, and I apologize in advance, but that's the sort of key thing, in the sense that the solution is that uniqueness in your project. So take the time to look into problems around you, take the time to maybe look at what you have around you, what you're interested in, problems in that domain, maybe the domain that you're applying for, and build out that project. The last thing I want to mention in this regard, actually adding on to before, is passion, right? Passion is the one thing that will drive you to do better. Passion is the one thing that will also make you stand out in your projects, right? If you have a project that has a deeper meaning to it, that has more than just a code to it, that just has more than a simple problem to it, something that you're truly passionate about, that could be discipline regarding ComSci or something outside, right? It could be a business application because you're also passionate about business, right? I've had a lot of great conversations with interviewers regarding some of my projects because of the side things that they boasted, right? This YouTube channel itself has boasted a couple of conversations, and it's out of the passion I had for video making that came out of, and they found interesting, that they found unique, right? The same thing I've had as well with sort of business-based project, investment-based projects, where it's the conversation actually leads astray from the code itself, from computer science itself, but the passion that it stemmed from. All right, the next thing I want to get into is GitHub open source contributions. Now, this one's a bit of a secret weapon. A lot of people sleep on this. You don't see it as commonly on resumes, so it brings that unique factor, and essentially that is contributing to open source projects and putting that on your resume. So if you aren't familiar with open source projects, it's basically code on GitHub available to anyone, for anyone to sort of make pull requests to and sort of make changes to, right? So to go about doing this, I could do a deeper dive into this, but generally speaking, you essentially have to find the project you want to work on. So there's so many options. You could go through GitHub topics like good first issue, beginner friendly, first timers only. There's also a lot of websites for this. Good first issue, dev, and firsttimersonly.com. But essentially, you can find a project that you actually like, or a tool that you actually use and have interest in, or maybe passion in, or is maybe trendy, whatever you want to look for. And then make your own contributions to that. So obviously you would start small, maybe even looking into the documentation edits with that just to understand the code. And then once you sort of level up, understand a bit more, you can make your own pull request, which is just a request to make changes to their code to add whatever you want and add a feature, solve some bugs, anything, a refactor messy code, anything like that. And this one is a game changer because it's a show of you being able to take a code base that already exists, understand it, understand its flow, and make modifications, updates, or improvements to it while fitting their existing system, their existing code, and everything like that. So this is a really great tool that I think is really slept on, but definitely something to look into and a sort of another factor that you can do for sure. All right, so those are the non-experience related things. The only thing I want to mention or sort of lead into experiences with is your hackathons and clubs. So hackathons is sort of balance of a project, but it's an experience of itself. But participate in hackathons. A lot of times they're local ones, online ones, and these are essentially opportunities for you to build something and have something tangible to show. And a lot of times there'll be sponsors where they'll give you specific tech to implement with, maybe a specific prompt and problem. So this is a great opportunity to show you're passionate and you can produce something, right? So that's definitely something worth looking into, as well as your clubs at school. Now, again, this video is about every possible puzzle piece, every little thing that you can do. Uh, Participating in clubs is something that you can add on your resume and also something that you can have again on your portfolio, right? That could be developing for their product, developing for the club itself, but any sort of related clubs, extracurriculars, ideally within computer science, that could be a specific discipline or not, always shows that passion and is something to sort of add to your resume, both literally and figuratively. Now, let's get into the meat of it, which is your experience, right? If you have the opportunity to have experiences, how do you tackle handling them? How do you tackle listing them on your resume, right? There's so many things that can be talked about like this, but I'm going to give you the key points that actually matter. So if you have experiences, likely you already have them listed on your resume. Now, the key things about your points uh, are two things. One, it should follow a certain method. A lot of people call it the XYZ method, the C method, a lot of different ways, and it should be numerics and quantifiable impact with that. So what does that mean? Your bullet points, while it's useful to say, okay, I developed this, I did that, generally speaking, when you have experience as a web developer, they know you developed on a web application. When you have experience as a low level developer or a C++, they know you've worked on memory management, everything like that. So you want to leave bullet points that actually matter, that are actually specific to what you did, what another intern may have not been able to do. And what is that? Numbers, quantifiable impact. And this is one of the hardest things to do. I know it's really hard to do, but that's where the key lies. So following a format like, okay, maybe you increased, this is why it's called the XYZ method, you increased X by Y% and reduced Z by anything else, right? The point is you show an impact that you did. So maybe you increase speed on something, you reduce the size on something, etc. A direct benefit that you did with a number correlating it. Now, if you are struggling with these numbers, it's very fair. It's very hard to come up with these numbers, but a lot of times that's why it's important that you keep track of what you're doing also during your internship. So writing down what you're up to, sort of keeping track of all the tickets you're working on, and grabbing the numerics and numbers when you can. So essentially, the gist of it should be your resume points should show a unique impact that you did in that position, right? The position title in itself implies the general, oh, you worked on the application. And don't get me wrong, if you're having trouble with numerics, add that job, you know what I mean? Especially maybe you don't have many experiences or you have space in your resume, but you really want to create points that quantify what you've done and have a direct impact, right? So someone can be like, oh wow, he really did something, right? It wasn't just a basic internship where he bug fixed, right? Or even if you did bug fix, did any of those bug fixes have impact? Did you speed things up, etc.? Be as specific as you possibly can with these bullet points, and that is applicable even to your projects, to your hackathon projects, to your clubs, to all of your bullet points. Try to be as specific as possible with a good impact. And I know that's hard sometimes, but that also takes the time, right? Now, the last thing I actually want to speak about in regards to your resume is creating custom resumes. I know this one, I know a lot of people be like, ugh. It's key, right? You start with a general. So you'll have your general resume. Then ideally what you want to do is sort of have more specific resume. So a lot of times you start with front end, back end, right? So you'll have a general resume and then you'll tailor one to front end. So maybe the jots you have on your experiences, you talk more about the web development you did, those technologies. The projects you list, maybe you list your web development projects, right? And for the back end ones, the other way around, right? Maybe database work you did, maybe logic work you did, right? C++, memory work you did, etc., right? That is sort of the general way to have specific resumes. Now, you guys are going to hate where I'm going with this. Application specific resumes. Now, I'll get into this when we talk about application, but it's something to keep in mind, especially again, in a market you're trying to match all the keywords. Taking the time for the bigger applications or taking the time for your applications to tailor the resume to that application, especially with the AI tools we have, is a very useful thing to do, right? It's a very useful thing to do because at the end of the day, they're looking for the best match for that position. All right, now we're going to get into the building your presence and LinkedIn and portfolio section. And I don't necessarily mean a literal portfolio, but let's get into the LinkedIn first. LinkedIn is key. LinkedIn is key. LinkedIn is key. I know a lot of people loathe it. I've been there as well, but it is genuinely still so underrated. Connecting can get you potential referrals for companies you're trying to apply to and recruiters. Many recruiters do use LinkedIn. I used to think that wasn't a thing until it happened, right? Uh, a lot of times recruiters are using LinkedIn, right? They want to find the best employee, and LinkedIn is a great tool for them to do that, right? And keep in mind, these recruiters also get bonuses typically for their hires, so they want to find the best person and they want to hire the person that they're choosing, right? Now, how do you optimize this? What do you do for this? First, keep your LinkedIn updated. The same way you're updating your resume, add those experiences, add those projects, add your clubs, add your hackathons, right? Now, on LinkedIn, you can brief in the points a little bit to not be as verbose because it's not as important there, but keep it updated, right? Keep your picture updated, keep everything updated. Remember how I mentioned having your GitHub? Not only do you want to ideally put that on your resume, but have that on your LinkedIn. Same thing when it comes to portfolio. Now, this is again one of those things where we were talking about everything's a puzzle piece and some things might be a 0.01. If you have the time, build a website, build that portfolio. I'm not going to say take a template or anything like that, but there's a lot of guidance. There's a lot of guidance on how to make a portfolio. So always, you're never left to just creative design or anything like that. But if you have the time, it's worth it. It's another notch on the belt that you can put on your LinkedIn. You can put on your resume if you want to sort of show, especially if you're in web design or web development, it might be worth looking into. Now, what else? And the last, and I would say one of the most important things that are unseen or underdone, connections. Connections. Connect with everybody you can. Now, this one is a bit of a hot take, but here's the thing. LinkedIn connections will get you recommended to more recruiters, which is at the end of the day the end goal, right? And also it increases your potential referees, and that's like the biggest thing. I found if you are able to sort of maybe there's a specific job that you want or you're in the interviewing process for, having connections with people at that company is a game changer. And I'm not even talking about referrals. This is coming into interview, which I'll mention later, but having people who work at the company, you can, if you're connected previously, you can reach out, ask for interview tips. I know if people reach out to me, I'm always trying to help. A lot of people are also like that too. Now, when it comes to referrals as well, you can always reach out on LinkedIn. The thing is, there's no harm. I know a lot of people are like, oh, cold messaging, cold messaging, cold messaging. It's all annoying until it works. And again, this is about doing everything you possibly can. And this is not a sort of out of the box method, right? People get paid to refer employees as well. So this is a win-win situation. It is completely slept on not to sort of maximize your LinkedIn connections and everything like that. So build up that LinkedIn. Also, off of the LinkedIn, you can also find a lot of times emails where you can again construct cold emails to sort of enhance that chance. And again, I know a lot of these will go unseen. A lot of times you might throw out messages and they're not read, but that does not mean you stop. That does not mean you might stop messaging that person, but that does not mean you give up in that sense. Everything is a puzzle piece, and we got to build it all. All right, so now that we've made it through the LinkedIn and portfolio building and you have your resume built up, let's get into the application grind. Now, while this is the most tedious, cumbersome, whatever you want to call it, it's also probably the easiest thing to do, especially if you get ahead of your applications to the point where maybe you'll only need to do one or two a day once you're caught up, five or six a day once you're caught up. Now, to start, where do we do this? Where are we applying? First and foremost, the obvious, LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn has a lot of job postings that will let you apply through LinkedIn, both on LinkedIn and outside. So again, that's another reason, build up your LinkedIn, right? So going through all of the postings on LinkedIn, you can set up notifications for certain roles. This is a big thing I found when we get into sort of the importance of applying as soon as the job posting is posted, but it has notification systems and a good recommendation system too. The more you apply, the more you'll get shown the jobs you might want to be hired for. Now, there are other sites such as Glassdoor and Indeed. However, I do find LinkedIn to be the most powerful one. However, always keep an eye out, right? You're looking for jobs, you need to apply to the most you can, right? Throw as many darts as you can. Now, along with this, again, remember that thing I said, specific resume, right? If you can, customize the resume for these applications. If not, use a general custom one, front end for front end, low level for low level, back end for back end, and so forth. Now, if you have any specific companies in mind, this is where the company sites come in, right? A lot of companies sort of typically release their internships around the same time. I know Shopify announces it a bit before, so you can actually snipe out the company sites and get in early. And a final hidden gem I want to mention, but maybe not so hidden anymore, is these GitHub job boards, right? There's a lot of, especially in the summer, of people who have a GitHub repository of jobs that are being posted for internships, and they get updated by the hour as soon as they drop, right? So once you have all these places to apply, what do? Well, like I said, you set up those notifications, but also you need to be in the habit of regularly checking. Yes, regularly checking, right? Even if you're caught up on all those applications, you want to be checking at least once a day, because you need to, and this is shifting to my next point, apply as soon as you can, right? So many applications are rolling. What does that mean? As they're interviewing as people apply. You could see an internship posted, one position available that could be filled while the application date is still open, right? You could apply across these 2 weeks, but they're hiring on a rolling basis. So that means they're getting applications, assessing them, and then interviewing. So it could be filled by the time way before the application deadline is, right? So it is crucial that you apply instantly when posted. This is probably one of the things that I underestimated the most that I found out recently. Apply as soon as it's posted, because they are also looking typically as the resumes are coming in, right? And so what plays into this? Your notifications, you checking it daily. Another strategic move I want to mention is using something called Simplify. There's a Chrome extension that a lot of you guys may know about, and it autofills a lot of your applications. This removes 70% of the pain, I can't lie. It's really, really, really useful, so I would recommend you check them out. I will put it somewhere here. Now, what do you do when you have all this set up, right? You're applying as they come out. You have notifications on to see as they come out. Well, now you pull your strategic moves. What are those? Well, first and foremost, those custom applications. Remember what I said? Remember to get those in. Second of all, you have built this LinkedIn network up, right? Now, this is when you can start reaching out. Either you can start reaching out before the applications for that specific company drop, or after you've applied. Typically, ideally do it before, because sometimes it's a separate process. But even then, reaching out to any of your connections who work there, right? Whether it's with the hopes of a referral, or whether hopes of just getting insight of what you could do to get an edge, or even tips on the interviewing process if you get into that. So we'll get into that a bit later, but having those connections and resources are crucial, right? Especially when you get into the interviewing process. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up for the application grind. Get in fast, get in targeted resumes, and reach out to whoever you can. Now, let's get into the final boss of this, the interview prep. All right, now as much as I put this section at the end, it is not something we do once we get the interview. A key thing is you cannot prepare for an interview the second you get the interview. That cannot be your first time preparing for that interview, or you might fall behind, right? Interview process is a perpetual thing you have to do in the industry. You know your leak codes, your system design, all of those stuff. You have to be fresh. So interview prep starts much before you get the interview. But what is interview prep? Now, let's start with the basics. We'll do behavioral. So behavior are your common questions, as you guys are probably familiar with, right? Go over strength and weakness, favorite experiences, times you solved a problem, how you tackle leadership, stuff like that. And I won't go too in-depth into the STAR method, because I know a lot of you guys are familiar, but I'll put it up here. But essentially, prepare those commonly asked questions, right? You would be surprised on how many companies are asking the same behavioral questions, right? But because they're asking the same behavioral questions, and because they're so commonly asked, there's also going to be a lot of people who are prepared with the perfect answer, so you need to come prepared as well. Preparing for behavioral is typically the lighter side relative to the technical portion of the interviews. So practice those, right? Do your mock interviews, even speak to yourself the way I'm speaking to this camera, right? Those commonly asked questions, right? Be ready to explain every single bullet point on your resume as well, right? A lot of times, aside from situational questions and technical questions, they will grill you, right? If you just said you improved something by 50%, you better be ready how to explain how you did that. And at that matter, how to explain it in the best way possible so that they understand you know what you're doing, you're him, you're her, you're gonna get hired, right? Now, moving forward into the most loathed and the most painful part of the interview process, your technical interviews. Now, we all know about LeetCode. We all don't want to do it, but that is exactly why we have to do it. A few companies, I don't want to say a lot of companies, are shifting towards a bit more system design interview given like all the cheating softwares, but LeetCode is still very, very prevalent. Now, if you have not begun LeetCode, how do you start? Where do you start? As every single person recommends, and I'm going to too, you should follow the Neat Code roadmap. Essentially, this is a roadmap of how to prepare for leak code questions by giving you certain leak code questions in order, starting with easier difficulty and sort of going it by category of data structures and algorithms. So technical interview prep is something you need to start before you start getting the interviews, right? You're not going to be able to tackle a hard question if you've never seen leak code before. So I would always recommend once you have everything built out, even in addition to whatever you're building out, your resume, your LinkedIn, you should be going through leak code. So that's the neat code, getting used to the questions, getting used to that pattern recognition, right? A couple of tips with that is definitely at the beginning you're gonna be stuck. You're gonna be struggling, and that's okay. It's important to acknowledge that's okay. You want to make sure you have your fundamental data structures algorithms down. So that's your like your typical data structures, maps, arrays, trees, everything like that, and the algorithms that come with it. And then you start on the leak codes because you want to make sure you have the tools to solve those problems. Now, once you're actually trying to solve those problems, don't be afraid to sort of be blocked. Don't be afraid to play around. Now, a key tip I would say that I'm not sure if it's the most orthodox method is after 20 minutes, 30 minutes of you handling a question, if you're not able to solve it, watch an in-depth explanation of the solution and make sure you understand it and are not just memorizing the solution, and then retry that question, I'd say after a few days or maybe a week, and make sure you can explain that solution, right? The biggest part of technical interviews isn't just coding up the solution, but it's being able to explain your idea, your thinking, your thought process, right? Because there's a lot of times you might be getting the correct solution in an idea and explaining it well, and it's some syntactical issues or if you're getting an edge case, but that shows much more understanding than you just coding it up. The code could be wrong and you can't explain what you're thinking, right? That's the key point, especially with moving towards system design. The way you're thinking and the way you're sort of designing your code and planning your code is crucial. Now, let's move on to sort of system design. All right, let's get into talking about system design. Now, typically, you actually, as an internship positions, you don't usually have to worry about system design, but I think with the movement of AI and a lot of the cheating softwares and some interviews I've taken as well, learning some system design is definitely beneficial, as you might get smaller scale questions for sure. And on top of that, new grad, no doubt, even years and years back, system design is always a question for junior roles and obviously moving up senior roles. So what is system design, or sort of what do we need to prepare in that regard? So as much as I could go completely in depth, that's a whole different, there are many books on it, many resources on it. Essentially, these are questions that are going to ask you about designing large scale systems, right? So it could be as broad as, hey, how would you design something like Instagram, Twitter, Uber? How would you design a sort of banking system? Now, these questions aren't necessarily code based, more so thinking about the code architecture, right? So thinking about things like scalability, trade-offs, right? If you use this SQL database versus a no SQL database, what are the trade-offs? What would be the best thing? When you're working with like AWS resources, I don't want to get too into that, which ones would be ideal to use and how to apply them, right? Things like CAP theorem, I'm not even going to go into that, but things to just be aware of. More importantly, and more likely they'll ask, is sort of just how to design systems, right? How to design programs more than the actual syntax of problem solving, right? An example, simpler question is, I mentioned before, like how would you design a bank system, and knowing, okay, there should be a class for the bank itself, the account itself, maybe some sort of class merging them both, just stuff like that. Horizontal and vertical scaling, all these concepts I'm throwing out there is just sort of a broad overview, but it's just good to really think about these sort of, how would you build these systems, and essentially showing that you can understand a bigger picture, right? Showing that you understand sort of architecture and scalability of solutions. Now, there's a lot of resources for this, a lot of books. There's something called Grokking the System Design Interview. It's a pain, but it's a gold standard. But there's also a lot of things on GitHub, like System Design Primer, and a lot of YouTube channels that will show you like beginner questions, some other things, maybe how would you design a URL shortener, right? So these are not huge questions, but definitely things to consider, and definitely some questions that I know certain internships have been asked, but nothing to be intimidated of. I do find that learning system design question answers at an internship level is much easier than leak code, right? Because it's more conceptual. And the code for it is, if they're asking you to code it, it's more so the class design and everything like that, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. All right, let's get into the last two things I wanted to talk about. So that's domain specific interview prep and question/company specific interview prep. Now, domain specific interview prep is exactly what you think it is. If you're interviewing for a web application development position, right? Front end, UI, full stack, there are typically common questions asked within these interviews, right? Like you'll find, oh, what is the REST? What is REST API? What are those principles? What are the HTTP methods? How do you deal with debugging this kind of bug? If it's React, what does this React hook do, right? Stuff like that. If it's low level, a lot of times you'll find commonly asked questions about deadlocks, memory management, pointers, everything like that. Or when it comes to machine learnings, a lot of times these postings will have the libraries that they're using, right? Pandas, NumPy, PyTorch, TensorFlow. Know the methods, right? Know the commonly asked questions in those domains, because you really, really would be surprised the repetitiveness of some of these things, especially at the intern level, right? So know the commonly asked questions with that, and know the stuff you have on your resume regarding the technologies you know to claim, especially when they're listed, right? So that's even just looking up commonly asked questions, and also moving into question and company specific interview prep, questions that were asked for that position and or at that company. You would be substantially surprised regarding the reuse of questions by a lot of companies, as well as the questions that you can find online, right? There is so many LeetCode, banks of LeetCode questions asked by certain companies. On Glassdoor, you have specific questions asked by companies, and it's not typical that they always switch up the difficulty of question, for sure. And also you'll find a lot of times they will ask similar, if not the same questions, right? Especially at smaller companies, you'll find that they're repeated, and this is all publicly available. Now, when we get a bit more into it, remember I mentioned the LinkedIn, connecting with people you might interview at, reaching out to those people for interview advice. They got asked the same questions you will. Searching for people on LinkedIn who are working or worked at the position you're interviewing for, and asking them, hey, I'm entering the interview process. What was it like? They might give you some specific feedback and input on questions that you might be asked, or sort of problems that you might be given. Of course, it would be against company policy to leak that, so I would never partake in any of that business. But you have those resources, right? When you build up that LinkedIn, you have people to reach out to. Hey, how'd you prep for this? What's this looking like? And sort of go about it that way. All right, so we're already at 30 minutes, past 30 minutes in the video, but there's so much more I could say about each individual point I made, but also so much more that I didn't even include in the video, and that's the beauty of it, right? This is about maximizing everything that you could do. There's always more growth we can all do in our technical capabilities, in the quality of our work, the quality of our resume, everything like that. So it's most important that you are continuously doing everything in your power, so that you know at the end of the day, even if you're not finding success in the market, that you're doing everything you can. And everything you do, the effort is not wasted. One day or another, a dart will hit. You just need to keep throwing. That's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys can take something away from this. Again, I'm nothing. I am not some sort of knowledgeable figure. These are just things that I found help. I found that I missed. I found that helped other people, and sort of maximizing the potential and your own potential in this game. If there's any questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'll answer everything I can. If I made any mistakes, please call me out. So much love to all of you guys. Drop a follow, drop a like for less, and I'm out. Peace.